And it is now time for me to smash the shed down, finally. Come here, boy. Come here. Come here. It's your time to shine. There we go. Our garden is kind of split into 3 sections. And previously, we've had to puppy-proof the top end of the garden, so this little monkey here doesn't run away and escape. We now need to move on to the 2nd and 3rd section of the garden. So this is basically like the 2nd section of the garden, and we still have a makeshift pen here, so when Nia wants to come out, he can run around and not basically get lost. So the plan is, I want to get rid of this makeshift pen, use this mesh here, and put a brand new fence up along the back of the shed. So from in the corner back there, I want a whole new fence with that mesh up to here, and then we're going to put a nice big gate in here. And then when we go through the imaginary gate through here, Holly, come on through. This is technically like the 3rd section of the garden now. The greenhouse is going to move over into the corner over there, and this very old shed, which is basically being held up by the ivy which is wrapped around it right now, is going because it's completely rotten, it's leaking, and I've got nothing in it anymore. So that's got to come down. The greenhouse has got to move, got to build a fence, then we can plant our veg. But that also does mean that I have to move tons and tons of like stone and brick and patio slabs, which I've just chucked over here for the last like multiple years. So all of this has got to go, and also I've got to get rid of all of these big flagstones as well, but I'm thinking these flagstones might actually work as a bit of a sort of patio sort of area in front of the shed and where the greenhouse will go. So I'm going to try to upcycle as much of that stone and brick, basically just make it look a lot better, because as you can see, it's it doesn't look good at all.
So I started off by using a heavy post whacker to whack in a fence post along the veg patch. And yes, using that whacker in the sun is hard work.
So this here is the new / very old gate. It's a old like cast iron driveway gate. It's pretty heavy, and I got it off of Facebook Marketplace, so a nice bit of upcycling. And I didn't know the size of this gate when I built this veg patch a couple years ago. This gate is wider than the gap which I thought it was going to be, so it basically overlaps this veg patch, which is a little bit annoying. So what I'm going to do is put a new fence post in about here, and then make the veg patch slightly smaller so the gate becomes the same width as the path down the side of the veg patch.
So instead of using the post whacker here, I decided to dig a hole here instead. That's because I'm going to be using a square fence post here, so I can easily add a latch for the gate.
Okay, so now I think I'm ready to postcrete in that fence post.
So by using some postcrete and adding water, this will give me a nice solid post. And whilst that is drying, I can now add one more post in the middle with the whacker, and constantly making sure everything is level and square to give a nice professional finish.
Gosh, this sun is so hot and bright today. Not used to it in England, but I'm not complaining because it means that I can actually get outside and do the gardening, which I've been meaning to do for such a long time. And now I'm moving on with these wire cutter, chunky wire cutter things, and I can cut off a section of this green mesh, this makeshift dog pen, and then that will be the fence, or the meshed fenced off bit for down the end.
And when I installed this makeshift dog pen, I knew that I was going to be using this mesh for our fence.
And by removing those screws means I can get this board off a little bit, and then I can feed this mesh between the veg patch kind of a border and that new fence, and I can get onto the shed, so I can put a few nails onto the side of the shed. Gosh, this is a bit awkward. And then I can nail it into this post as well.
And by drawing a line down the shed means that I can now nail the green mesh to the shed and make sure that it is nice and level. And I have to admit, tightening the mesh is pretty tricky on your own, so I use my level as a lever to stretch and tighten it so I could easily nail it in position.
now this green mesh is all fastened to these fence posts and it's all nice and tight, I'm going to be using this here, and this is like half round fencing rail, I think you call it. I've used it quite a lot on the rest of the garden as well, and when we put it along the top along here, it just kind of like really nicely finishes off this fence.
And once that rail is screwed in place, I can now add a few more nails along the top edge of the mesh to keep it nice and tight and to stop it flopping around.
Now that fence is pretty much done on that side, and now need to put another fence on the other side of the shed, and this one is going to be a lot more tricky. And the main reason is there's literally no access. This massive apple tree is in the way, and the fence has basically got to go here, right back. I don't even know you can even see me, right back to the fence, which is back here, and I need to basically whack two posts in, one here, one over there in this bush. There's literally like zero access back here. So I literally have no idea how I'm gonna do this on my own.
So as I became one with nature, I could get the whacker back out and attempt to whack in two more posts. And yes, this was very tricky and very, very awkward to get done. But once they were in, you guessed it, I could now add some more of that green mesh, and this small awkward fence is now done. And when I say done, I don't actually mean done, as I now have to move the original edge of the veg patch in to rejoin the square fence post.
Now, I know that this gate is very, very old and also very, very rusty, and eventually I know that I'm going to have to give this a lick of paint. This has probably survived the last 50 years unpainted. It could probably last another couple of weeks before I actually paint it. And if you watched our previous video, you would know that I actually got two of these off of Facebook Marketplace for like £20, so like £10 a gate, which I think is an absolute bargain. So the important thing I'm going to do now is actually hang this gate to puppy-proof this garden, and to do that, I've actually got some new ones of these, and these are brand new hinges, and I've also got a new latch as well. And I'm just hoping that my measurements are right and the gate actually fits in that gap.
And as you know, nothing is ever straightforward, so as I use my safety squints, I can now angle grind one of those new hinges to make it a little bit smaller. That's because there's an angled piece of metal on the gate right behind where the hole of the hinge goes, so I had to make it shorter so it actually would fit. And now I could add the hinge bracket to the fence, which is directly opposite that newly post-created square post, which I hope is strong enough because as you can see, it is a little bit wobbly. But once the gate is on and closed, section 2 of the garden is now fully puppy-proof.
So as you can see, Neo's already super excited to go play down the garden, because he's not actually been down the full garden on his own. Good boy, sit. Ready? Go on then. Look at him go. Good boy. Good boy. Come here then. Neo, good boy, come on. How exciting is this? You've got the whole garden to play with. Good boy, good boy, good boy, come on.
And it was so nice to see Neo jumping around and playing in the garden, living his best life.
So, I feel like I need to change things up a little bit, and it is now time for me to smash the shed down, finally. But I don't quite know where to begin.
So I was a little clueless, and I started to poke around unknowing the best way to tackle this shed. And as you can see, this was pretty much pointless. But then I started to get a little bit more heavy-handed. And I have to admit, the shed was holding up better than I thought it would. So with my crowbar in hand and quite a few whacks later, I felt like I was actually getting somewhere. So I just went to town on it.
Well, That's a bit trickier to take down than I first thought. Oh. Well, I have to give this shed some credit. I thought it was going to give up very easily, but it went like the full 12 rounds. Whew, and I'm knackered now.
And at this moment, I didn't realise that I'd smashed the old shed into the new one, and then one of the fascia boards flung off of the new shed. So I then thought that I'd better smash the old shed up in the opposite direction.
And somewhere amongst that, I've just lost my crowbar. It's a bit annoying. So, just like magic, and 3 days later for me, the shed, the devastation of the shed is no more. I've still got a long way to go, but the shed is down. That means I can get on with some groundworks now. And at the very bottom of the garden, we have this ditch. Now this ditch is probably like 4 or 5 feet lower than the height of the garden, which is like 1.2 meters, maybe 1.5 meters lower down into the ditch. And when we first bought this house, we used some corrugated metal and some fence posts to help square it up, so it didn't just kind of like go down into the ditch. And as you can see, I never actually finished doing it about 5 years ago. So what I'm going to do now is use the metal, which I bought 5 years ago, finish off this little bit of fencing here, which means I can then level all of the ground up here, which gives us a nice flat surface to work with.
Once that corrugated metal was secure and I started to level the ground, this area, which was completely wasted space before, really started to feel like it was taking shape.
Well, that was actually quite difficult to shift all of that earth around, but the big mound is now gone and that hole is kind of filled, so it's kind of level. As you can see, yes, the rest of it I've not even tried to tackle because I do things sporadically and all over the place, and yes, I know it would be easier to move this stuff out of the way to level it all, but that's just not the way I work. I'm moving on to another task, and something which I feel like I'm doing all the flipping time at the moment, and that is I'm going to build another fence for like the 3rd time now. We did section 1 of the garden, we've done section 2 of the garden, and now this is kind of like perimeter fence number 3 to stop Neo, if he ever gets into this bit, falling down into the ditch.
Now, you've seen me do this many times before. We whack a post in, add the half-round wooden rail, then use my level to stretch that green mesh and nail it into position. And just like that, we have our 3rd and hopefully final nice and secure garden fence. And what I like about this fence style is that it feels light and elegant, and the natural wood and green mesh makes it feel like it just disappears into the background. But now I have the hard task of shifting all of these ridiculously heavy flagstones out of the way. And after single-handedly doing everything myself and shifting all of those back-breakingly heavy stones, I finally asked for a hand off of Holly and her mum to help me shift the greenhouse over to its final position at the bottom corner of the garden. Now, if you remember at the very beginning of the video, I said about a massive pile of stones and rocks and boulders and patio slabs and flagstones and stuff that I had to move. The pile has got a little bit smaller. That is because I just got a little bit carried away and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I ended up kind of making a raised bed, a raised planter. So yes, I've basically just got completely carried away, and then I just remembered that I haven't actually picked the camera up to say what I was doing. But
is starting to look really, really good. And my thinking behind this and why I decided to do this was that we've got so many of these stones which were just piled up all kind of uneven and look really messy, that this is still technically a big pile of stones, but it's a useful pile of stones because we're going to turn this into a kind of like a mini wildflower garden, because that will encourage the bees to come down to the veg patch and then into the greenhouse as well. Oh yes, and I've also started to sink in those big heavy flagstones as well in front of the greenhouse door, so you've got this really nice like raised bed area which will have those wildflowers and stuff in it, and then we've got this nice kind of heavy duty patio, very small patio area in front of the greenhouse. And now for me personally, this area has really started to take shape because we had that really old dilapidated shed in the corner. Now moving the greenhouse and building that raised planter has really opened this space up and it's looking so good. But as you can see, I've still got a long way to go. Okay, so I now need to move on and sort out this kind of area over here, and I've got a load of patio slabs which are piled up. So the mission now is to continue this weed guard straight down to the end of the garden and use those patio slabs as they should be used on the floor, and continue this path straight down to the end over there, which basically means that we can get to the compost bin. And then I'm thinking with these stones here, I might actually just try to utilize them like I did with the stones on this area and build just another little kind of raised bed area just against the fence over there to use those up, which means that all of these could probably be used as well, and just kind of do like a makeshift raised bed area by using the stones, because I have no idea what else to do with these.
So these patio slabs we've actually had laying around ever since we moved in. So as I move them out of the way, that means that I can start to prep the ground by making it nice and flat and lay out the weed guard. And I know what I'm doing may be not up to some people's high standards, but I've been getting a real sense of accomplishment by upcycling all of the stuff we had laying around, rather than just buying new stuff in just for the sake of it.
And now I've just stepped away from that and looked at it, it kind of looks like I've built a crypt or a tomb or something. It's kind of a odd size and shape.
And by building these raised planters means that when I level the ground, I actually have somewhere useful to put all of that soil. Again, meaning I don't have to go out and actually buy any. And when I was sorting some of those patio slabs out, I noticed that two of them had some very useful curved cracks in them, which seemed to line up pretty perfectly.
Now this was an absolute fluke. This was not planned at all, but when I laid those patio slabs down, I thought to myself, well, they're almost making a perfect semicircle with the cracks where the corners have come off. And it just so happens that the compost bin that I have is pretty much a perfect match. So I would like to say that I planned that, but that is what you call one of those perfect accidents. It looks really good that those patio slabs are now around the compost bin. Now, yes, I'm just thinking to myself that I must be going a little bit crazy, because I should not be getting that excited that the compost bin fitted like that. But I'm pretty happy with it. And whilst I bring Neo down here to take a little look at what I've been up to, I thought that this is the perfect time to kind of have a little bit of one-on-one, or 1 + 1 and 1. This video might not seem it, but it's literally taken me about 2 months so far to do all of this work. It makes me now ask the question, and I want you to comment in the comment section down below. What do you think that I should do more of on this channel? I need more quicker DIY sort of project videos. So let me know in the comment section down below, because something like this is completely sort of unplanned. I don't really prep anything for this, and I wing it. I just make it up as I go along. So that's why things take me a lot longer, because I literally have no idea what I'm beginning with and what I'm going to be ending with. I'm just, like I just said, making it all up. So what other type of videos would you like to see on this channel reckon you have got a scent of something, can't you, boy? But anyway, like I just said, let me know in the comment section down below, what other videos would you like to see which are quicker and I can make quicker, that aren't these sort of big projects, maybe some smaller DIY videos. Let me know.
And as you can see, I left a decent sized space behind our greenhouse. That is because I thought it would be super useful to have a space to chuck all of our leftover crap behind. And one of the last things that I needed to do was to weed and turn over our veg patch, and also add some wood chip to the path leading into section 3 of our garden. And this was really a satisfying process, as I knew that I was basically at the end of this project.
So before I show you the finished and final shots, you just need to remember that it is not finished or final yet. For instance, we still need to plant all of our veg in our veg patch and plant more veg in our greenhouse. And at the moment, I'm not quite sure what we're going to be planting in the tomb. I'm assuming some form of wild flowers. And at the end of the garden, we've got these two really nice kind of concrete bench legs. So I want to build a bench kind of seat to go on here, which means that we can come down in the morning, have a morning coffee and gaze upon our newly raised bed wild garden, kind of wild seed, wildflower garden. So you just have to imagine that this whole garden is now full of life, full of bloom, full of color, full of veg and full of flowers. Because at the moment, it doesn't really look like there's much life down here. It's quite grey. But just imagine in a month or two's time when this is all grown and fully in blossom. So from start to finish, it has been about 2 months, and I have basically single-handedly completely transformed this section 3 of the garden myself. And apart from the actual fence that I put in, everything else was completely upcycled. I haven't spent any money doing this. I've just used everything that was already in the garden and just piled in the corners. All of the brick, all of the block, all of the patio slabs, all of the stones, all of the gravel. Everything was already just chucked around this garden, and I've somehow managed to turn it into what I think is a really nice, functional and just practical space to use down here. So thank you so much for watching until the very end of this video. If you've made it this far, a like and subscribe would be really appreciated. So without further ado, let's now look at the final sexy shots.